Hello, everyone. Time zone appropriate greetings. For me and Jonathan, it is morning. Thank you very much for attending today. I'm John Murcott, and I run products and strategy for HawkSearch. I'll be hosting this webinar with our senior solutions engineer, Jonathan Meyer. Hey, Jonathan.
Hello, John.
We're both very excited about our subject today regarding AI. In general, because HawkSearch hasn't traditionally talked much about our AI capabilities, and that's going to change. And that's one of the reasons why I joined the company relatively recently. So unlike Jonathan, who's been here for a while, I've been with the company for 9 months, and I'm super excited about this subject. The title of the webinar is AI, Not All Intelligence is Artificial, but Some Is, and How Can You Take Advantage of It? We do recognize it's kind of a little fun with the title here, but the reason why is we don't want to overpromise or overhype what's going on with AI these days, but also because we believe that using technology through AI combined with the expertise of merchandisers and marketers is really where the value is. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Normally, when Jonathan and I do these types of webinars, we banter a lot together and we kind of go back and forth. But this time I have the advantage, just like all the visitors here, to sit back a little bit and listen. So Jonathan, good luck. We're going to be handing it over to you. I'll just put in a couple of quick bullet points as we're going through the webinar itself. First of all, we welcome your questions. So you can submit them through the interface itself there. We'll put the questions at the end. If we don't get to it today, we'll follow it up later. And if you do have any questions, technical questions, we do have some support people on as well. There should be a help icon there, so just click on that if you have any questions. So I'm going to sit back and relax and listen to the presentation just like everyone else. And Jonathan, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, John. I appreciate the handoff there. That was wonderful. It's definitely going to be a fun presentation today. John, as you kind of talked about there, my name is Jonathan Meyer. I'm one of the senior solutions engineers for the Bridgeline team. We've done a few of these webinars for this platform here. So if you're joining us again, appreciate it. If you're seeing this for the first time, I've been working in the kind of site search space for over 8.5 years now, coming up on 9 years, so getting close to a decade. So I have a lot of experience behind the screen here, and I'm looking forward to covering obviously a topic that's relatively new in this space, is really kind of how AI is impacting this environment and how different companies can leverage it. What are the tools and functionalities? So, John, thank you for that introduction. We'll go ahead and get right into the presentation here. Now, what we always try and start with is kind of an overview. What are you going to be able to take away from this presentation? Why should you invest your time in watching it? So let's cover what the topics are that we're going to be tackling today. We're going to understand the basics of AI and kind of how that has an impact on e-commerce. That is obviously very important, but we would also make sure that we're identifying the right tools and technologies to incorporate into your AI strategy. So there's a lot of different things that are going around this space, a lot of different topics to cover, but one of the things that we want to make sure that we're tackling today is kind of the practical knowledge of that. Where can you leverage this? What are those tools that you can be looking for? What does that actually look like? And of course, as part of that, we're going to be talking about how you can leverage that AI to enhance your customer experience and, of course, drive sales. If you're in that kind of e-commerce space, we want to make sure that the end goal of all of this is that you're getting people to actually convert. And if you're not, if you're more in a kind of a content space, there's still a lot of good information that you can take away from this, because a lot of this is just kind of a universal, here's what makes more sense, here's where those AI tools are coming in. And of course, we're big proponents of proof is in the pudding, and so we're going to also be providing real-world examples of successful AI implementation in e-commerce spaces, showing you some screenshots of different clients, talking you through how that AI implementation is handled, what the strategies were there, and kind of what the goals are as a part of that. Now, we thought we'd have a little fun with this, not just in the title, like John mentioned there, which of course is a pretty fun title there, but we wanted to we thought, well, how can AI help in e-commerce? When we were thinking about AI, of course, one of the big things in this space is ChatGPT. So we actually just asked ChatGPT. We went into ChatGPT and we said, hey, how can AI help improve an e-commerce site search experience? And it came back with a long list of different suggestions. And we kind of looked at those and said, you know what, let's take some of these and bring these back into the presentation. Thought it was just kind of a fun framing for this, because who else knows better about the AI and how it can apply to e-commerce than the AI itself here? So the first thing that ChatGPT came back to us with was personalization. And really, this is kind of one of the spearheads into how you can use AI on an e-commerce experience. And as you can see here, one of the things that ChatGPT was talking about, how it can analyze that user behavior, purchase history, preferences to provide personalized search results. Obviously, this also applies to other functionalities in terms of like recommendations and kind of how all of that can feed back in. And it is going to be one of those kind of primary ways that you can take AI technology and layer that into your e-commerce experience to make sure that you're driving a really improved kind of experience. So what are we talking about there? Let's give you some kind of examples in terms of what we're thinking about. Now, kind of the classic thing that you might be thinking out is that kind of carousel or recommendations widget when you are landing on a product detail page where you can see, here are the things that you may also like. Here are the things that we suggest for you. These are kind of classic strategies that you see in a kind of recommendations framing. And these are typically built out of using the signals that an e-commerce site would receive from a visitor on the platform. So when they arrive on your site, usually there's some kind of cookie-based approach that's going to track, okay, hey, we know that this is this user, this unique user who's logged into the site or is just visiting the site. A lot of these AI strategies can use kind of a first-party cookie that doesn't require a visitor to be logged in. It can track kind of more anonymously, but understand that that visitor might have repeat sessions, might come back several different times. And so during that information, as that visitor is interacting with the site, it's tracking things like, obviously, what searches is the visitor using? Search is a really key intent of an individual visitor. What results are being returned? We can track that information to see, okay, well, they did a search for, in this case, light switches and sockets and gaskets and things like that. And then as those results are being returned, we know, okay, these are the things that the visitor might have been looking for. We're also understanding then kind of navigation choices that a visitor might be making. So they've done that search for a light switch, they've done that search for a gasket, they're getting back in those results. Well, then what values out of those results are they refining that experience by? Are they saying, they're looking for a particular voltage or amperage or a particular kind of configuration? Are they looking for a certain kind of color of a shirt? Are they looking for men's or women's apparel? Are they looking for particular sizes? All of those kind of navigation choices that a visitor will make from a search page will help also build out that personalization, because the tool can learn from those signals to say, well, not only was it this set of products that the visitor was interested in, but it's also these particular points about the product that the visitor was interested in. Similarly, we can also track things like, well, what kind of, are we doing not just a search experience, but are they using navigation choices, using that kind of big mega menu that sometimes gets referred to, or just kind of your top level navigation to navigate through. That can also be tracked. And then again, when they get to that kind of category page and that landing page, you can continue to track, well, what filters and refinements are they using on that experience to get into the specific product they're looking for. And of course, other signals like, what are they then adding to cart? What are you actually purchasing? And looking at that over time as well. So not just off of a singular visit, but over multiple visits, over multiple purchases, over, years long presentation or situations when a visitor is logged in, that information can stay active and we can start to build out really kind of personalized experiences in these kind of carousels like you're seeing here. But also, as ChatGPT was referencing there, that can also be used to improve the actual search experience. So let's get into a little bit more of a practical example here. We were talking in that example there where you're seeing those kind of carousels. Here's some examples of different ways of that being used. So the first one that we're seeing here is a recently viewed strategy on the right-hand side of the screen there, where we're seeing several items that are being suggested. This is a way of personalization. Tracking, while I've been on this site before, I've looked at other items, I've engaged with other items, maybe I've added other items to my cart. When I come back to a site, this is a way to really quickly re-engage a visitor and say, hey, let's leverage that personalization, that AI-driven kind of tracking of what's happening behind the scenes, and make suggestions for what you've recently viewed. It's a great way to re-engage a visitor when they come back to the site. It's also a good way to, if someone is on your site and they're browsing through multiple different items, to allow them to very quickly jump back to an item. If I'm comparing and contrasting, I'm doing research. If you recall from our previous webinar here on this platform, we were talking about kind of different visitors' personas. If I was that informational visitor, something like this, using that recently viewed personalization, can help me jump around as I'm trying to, further find out specific things about particular products. And then the other thing I want to highlight here, if you look in the image there on the left where it's saying your recent views, and it's being layered into more of a search experience, as I've clicked into like an autocomplete, we're pulling back in that kind of experience. This is where we can start to see things like searching, pulling that, being kind of a very primary focus of a lot of this personalization. It's not just suggesting these recently viewed items, but when I go in and I do that search to say, in this case, maybe I was doing a search for a backpack, when those search results are returned, not only can it layer in all of that kind of relevancy and a lot of kind of the wisdom of the crowd functionality, but it can also be personalized. Those results that are being returned, all of those signals that we were talking about from the aspect of understanding, well, what other searches has that visitor done? What other filters and facets and refinements has a visitor selected? What purchases have they made in the past? What items have they added to cart that we would use to build out kind of your classic recommendations kind of carousel of suggestions? All of that same information can then be used to also feed back into the search results. So it really is kind of a holistic approach to how personalization can be layered into an e-commerce experience. You have those kind of classic carousels like we're seeing here, but that information can also be layered into the search response, so that when I do a search, the results that I would see would be very different from the results that John might see when he does a search, because we're going to have different preferences, different kind of priorities in terms of what we're looking for, even if it's the exact same keyword search. So personalization, it's one of the things that we wanted to lead off with here. It's really kind of one of the main ways that you can start to layer in AI functionality into an e-commerce experience. It can be very impactful because it is that kind of one-to-one level of, oh, hey, the site remembers who I am, and it's using the information that I'm giving it to drive further recommendations that are going to be important for me as an individual visitor. But there is, of course, a lot more that can be done. So we've taken the next topic that ChatGPT suggested to us, and again, we couldn't agree more. So they provided back in this idea of recommendation engines. So we were talking about kind of that personalization, and personalization is really kind of a strategy that gets used a lot in recommendation engines to present that kind of information, that personalization. But recommendations have a bigger kind of approach to how they look at the items that they are returning. So as we can see here, AI-powered recommendation systems can suggest related products based on user browsing and purchase history. So this is taking a lot of that same kind of information on a personalized level, and then looking at that and saying, well, how can we drive more of the broad approaches? Maybe we don't know enough information about that individual visitor, but we know about the kind of the relationships that we see in this space. We know that, well, if this visitor looks at this, this backpack, they're often very commonly then going to go look at this jacket. Or if they're looking at this particular, let's give you the example here. Let's move into the next slide. If I'm looking at this particular bike, well, then we also see that visitors are very commonly then going on and buying a lock for that and buying a helmet for that. And these are suggested things that we can learn from, not just at that one-to-one level to say, well, we know that when I was browsing the site that I then moved into these products and looked at this, but leveraging that kind of information and looking at it in aggregate to drive kind of that wisdom of the crowd approach. And this is a good way to really kind of help plug those gaps that you might have in your product catalog, in your relationship catalog, to understand that when a visitor is looking at this particular item, how can we increase those kind of average order values, increase that kind of cross-sell, upsell functionality? Recommendations using this kind of AI approach is a really intelligent way to go about doing it, because it just leverages all of those signals that we're already tracking to drive the personalization, and then just kind of takes a step back and says, well, in aggregate, what is everyone else doing with this information, and how can we go ahead and present that so that, in the example that we list over there on the left-hand side for the recommended accessories, I'm looking at a particular bottle. There's going to be specific caps that are going to be important to go along with that. And what does that relationship look like? What are the similar items that other visitors have been looking at? And using the product information as well to help inform that. So it can be kind of both ends of the equation here. We can use the wisdom of the crowd kind of approach, like you see on the right there, that customers also bought, and then using the AI to look at the attributes of a particular product to make suggestions for similar items, accessories that go along with that. And again, the idea here is to not have this be a heavy lift for an individual business, but to leverage that AI to say, okay, well, we know what is going to be important for the visitors at this point, what are they commonly navigating to next, and what can be kind of purchased along with that. So again, let's give you a practical example of what we're talking about here. So here we've got an example of someone that's looking at buying a particular kind of modular drawer, so one that can buy like 12 of these things and make a nice stack of drawers for storage and so on and so forth. And you're seeing this example of frequently bought together. This is an example of that kind of AI learning from the individual visitors. Well, what are they then commonly purchasing? When this item is being bought, what else have we seen being bought along with this? And as you can see, it's a very common kind of, I'm making room for like a laundry kind of setup here. I've got a hamper. I've got the drying rack for that. And in addition to, kind of the assembly option. So you can see kind of both of these approaches of looking at when visitors are looking at an item, what are they adding to their shopping cart? What are they purchasing along with that? And using those signals to build out these relationships. And this is a really easy way here, as you can see kind of the approach that I believe this is Target took in terms of adding this functionality, is a really simple kind of checkbox on that. You want to add these items to your shopping cart all in one go. It's not something then that a visitor has to go through each individual item and add those items. So there's some additional kind of logic that you might want to layer on top of the suggestions that you see here to make this even more beneficial to you from an e-commerce perspective. But this really clearly demonstrates that idea of learning what a visitor has done in the past and leverage that to present these kind of recommendations kind of at large for that wisdom of the crowd. Maybe John only bought that modular drawer white, and maybe he only bought the hamper, and maybe I only bought the garment rack that's drying there on the right hand side. But for all of the other visitors, they're seeing kind of this benefit of all of our individual interactions and presenting this kind of as a holistic, hey, here's all the things you might want to buy together. And it can be a very, very powerful kind of tool to help improve your e-commerce experience and to make your visitors happy. I think sometimes we get lost in this idea of, how can we get that average order value up? How can we drive better sales? And that is obviously the end goal there. But by presenting this information and kind of framing it as, hey, here's the things that you're probably going to be looking for, you create not only a better experience for your visitors there, it becomes something that I come back to the site because I know, hey, they're going to have that kind of functionality where I don't have to hunt and peck through the site. I don't have to do 12 different searches. I don't have to navigate through a bunch of different things. I go to the one product I'm looking for, and everything else that's going to be needed for that is presented there for me. So very powerful functionality. Completely agree with ChatGPT's assessment that that is a great functionality of the AI kind of tooling that we have available for us now. So what would be one of the other things that we can take advantage of? So we've been talking a lot about kind of, and hopefully you're picking up on this, that this is something that it kind of starts to build on from one end to another. It starts off with this idea of, well, we can track that individual user. We can see kind of what that individual visitor is doing. We can use those signals to drive that personalization. Hey, if we have that personalization, we can kind of look at, well, what is everyone else doing, and use that to drive this kind of wisdom of the crowd. Well, similarly, this is building on that same kind of topic. We can see, well, what is everyone else doing from a perspective of what are they searching on, what are they navigating to, what are they clicking through, what are they adding to their shopping cart. And when we look at that in aggregate, that can give us even more functionality to drive these kind of behavioral analyses. And what this means is that, the kind of example that we've been providing had been more of a kind of recommendations carousel, where we're using those signals to drive that improvement from a kind of product description. What we're able to do as well is leverage that signal to just kind of improve the overall experience. And so the classic example is learning from what visitors are interacting with in the search results. There's a kind of a common approach of, well, when someone does a keyword search, in this case for, let's say, like a cable or a Cat5 cable, they're going to pull back in from a relevancy perspective a certain set of results. Let's just say there's going to be 100 results that are returned out of that, and the relevancy is going to drive kind of the ordering of those based off of that keyword search. Well, what we can do with this behavioral analysis is understand, well, out of those 100 items, what actually is leading towards those conversions? What are the items that visitors are interacting with? What are the items that visitors are adding to cart? What are the items that visitors are actually converting off of? And using those signals to help improve those results. So it's not only just what was relevant, what matched from a keyword perspective, but also then highlighting those items that are leading towards those desired behaviors of interaction with the results, adding the item to cart, adding that item to, actually completing the conversion off of that. And so the graphic there on the left is really kind of trying to help highlight that idea of we can move the items around automatically by using this AI and learning from what your visitors are doing to take an item that would have been lower in a relevant result and move that much higher towards the top of the results based off of that behavioral analysis and understanding what your visitors are going to be most likely interested in. Similarly, we can use those kind of things to layer into different experiences. So, someone goes into that search box, they start to say that they're looking for sunglasses. Well, those results can be tweaked to not just display what's the relevant results for that, but to display what are the popular, the trending, the hot now kind of items here. So that not only is this going to be, again, relevancy, we're not suddenly showing, beach towels and other things that are unrelated to the term sunglasses, staying relevant to that search term, but letting that behavioral analysis inform that experience and pull back in suggestions for additional items that kind of are more likely to be what the visitor is actually looking for. So what are the kind of practical examples for this? Well, one of the things that we want to highlight is that this should be something that you have the ability to kind of easily influence in a tool. There's a lot of, when we think about AI and we think about behavioral analysis, something that is important to understand is that this shouldn't be something that, you need a dedicated AI developer to be kind of focused in on. And so from at least the HawkSearch perspective, we wanted to kind of take these ideas of behavioral analysis and really bring them to a very easy to control kind of functionality. We're going to track all the signals. We're already doing that to drive the personalization. We're already doing that to drive kind of those wisdom of the crowd recommendations. When we want to influence the search results, when we want to influence kind of the display of those results and the ordering of them, we don't want this to be something then that is buried in kind of in a black box, because every business has a little bit of a different approach. Maybe you're really not concerned about what visitors are just interacting with. Maybe it really is only the conversion that's important for you as a business. On our end, we wanted to make sure that this was something that, again, didn't need a developer to get involved with, that this was something that any kind of business user could come into the tool and say, well, using this slider, I can go ahead and change the weighting. How important is each one of these signals? And by breaking it down into these kind of 3 different approaches, it gives us the ability to kind of manage, well, what is the most important aspect of that? And we can incrementally improve and increase the importance of each step of that kind of classic customer journey of the learning search multiplier tracking, well, what are visitors actually selecting? And where is that result when it is being selected? So understanding if something was further down in the results, that's a more important signal to improve its ranking. Then, of course, tracking the next step in that and then add to cart journey. If they add that item to their shopping cart, we treat that as another important signal, and it's slightly more important than just the learning search multiplier. And then, of course, that orders multiplier tracking, does that actually lead to a conversion? And that's being treated as much more importantly than the other signals. And all of these can work in conjunction with each other. So if someone lands on a product detail page, without interacting with search at all, we can still track that add to cart information. We can still track that orders multiplier, and that can still be fed back into the overall behavioral analysis, so that when someone does that search, when someone interacts with that search box and sees those kind of trending items, they can get that experience. So the actual practical example here, we've got an example of a search, someone doing a search term for plates on a site, pulling back in results, and you can see the different kind of timeframes that we're talking about here and how that behavioral analysis can dramatically impact the ordering of these results. And so we have a screenshot of these results from before April 15th. So kind of, before the kind of really at the start of spring, and we can see some results, kind of more generic. There's really not a whole lot going on in that time frame. We got some horse racing plates being returned there. Maybe the Kentucky Derby was going on around that time frame. But you can see then after June 15th, now that we're getting into the summer months here, those results for plates have dramatically changed based off of that behavioral analysis. What was important in the past is no longer important on June 15th. The items that your visitors are interested in, what they're adding to cart, what they're converting off of, has dramatically changed. And so the search results, the experience that a visitor sees on this site, is leveraging that behavioral analysis to improve those results. So that what was important to me now, when I come to the site, it's June 15th, June 16th, and I do that search for plates, I'm going to be looking for, I'm getting ready to have a summer barbecue. I'm having the family over. I might be looking for something like that summer pool party square paper plate there. That might be something that I'm interested in, and that's going to be floated up more toward the top based off of what other visitors have done in the past, what they've added to cart, what they've clicked into, what they've converted off of. And so it's just a really easy way to layer in this AI, this behavioral analysis, into other areas beyond those kind of common examples that you might think of, it's going to be all those kind of carousels, all those kind of recommendation things like that. It can really be layered into kind of the full experience of the site search and kind of how all the different areas that e-commerce can touch on. So let's go ahead and move on to the next topic. And this one is near and dear to our hearts. Obviously, HawkSearch has a lot of different functionalities. And a lot of this is obviously not just, specific to how HawkSearch might tackle things, but this is really one of the areas, as John was mentioning, that, we really have not historically talked a lot about how HawkSearch layers AI. This is one of the reasons why I want to have this kind of conversation, but also because we have made a lot of inroads into kind of query understanding. AI algorithms can analyze user search queries to understand the context and intent. So what do we mean by that? Well, that can open up a whole kind of other can of worms in terms of query understanding. There's a lot of different things that can mean. Where we have kind of led into and where we've leaned into in driving this kind of functionality is to really look at some core ways that we see our clients struggling with user search queries. And what we've kind of started off with is this idea of understanding different unit of measurements as kind of the main way to help parse out some of that query understanding. Because ChatGPT very kind of rightfully understands that there's a lot of kind of fuzziness, let's say, to the way that a visitor can search on particular terms. So the classic example that we have here, you can see that we've done a search for a 3.5 inch exhaust and then a 3.5 inch exhaust. The only thing that's changed in these two different examples, where the one on the left is returning no results and the one on the right is returning results, is the fact that we've changed from using a double quotation to mean inch to actually spelling out the term INCH. And so this is a kind of a very common problem where maybe the color, I refer to it as blue, but it's referred to as, seafoam in the product description, or I refer to, the vendor that we receive this product catalog spells everything out as INCHES, or, the data is contained not in 3.5, but maybe 3 space 1/2 as the fraction. There's a lot of inconsistency kind of, from one vendor to the next, how one person describes this product, how another person describes that product. And it just leads to this kind of, again, lack of understanding of what the query actually means. And so we've really tried to tackle this, again, starting with that kind of unit of measurement approach here. And so, again, we want to give you some practical examples of what this actually looks like from a usability perspective, and what are the ways that you can kind of expect this to function on a live site. And so here we have an example of one of our clients, Crescent Electric, that is using this kind of functionality. We refer to it as like a smart search. It's a way to understand the query that's being submitted to us. And you can see exactly what's happening in this request here. I've done a search for 6 INCHES PVC end cap, so 6 inches PVC end cap. And the tool is understanding all the variations within that. When we're kind of, again, doing that query understanding that, like ChatGPT is saying, is an important aspect of AI, we've got that built into the tool here to help parse that functionality out and really kind of drive that understanding of the search term, so that the results, as you can see from that autocomplete, are suggesting items that don't necessarily match that initial 6 INCHES as the exact keyword, but match the intent of what the visitor is looking for. Because if I'm looking for 6 INCHES, well, really I can be looking for 6 INCH, or products that have 6 double quotation as part of the result set. And where we kind of then looked at this and said, well, this is great. This is kind of a good way to, clean up some of those kind of initial searches. We also realized that there can be a lot of kind of variations in how that can be submitted, even beyond just kind of the INCH versus IN versus double quotation. But we can also understand kind of the relationship between other units of measurements, because if we understand what inches actually means as a unit of measurement value, we can then also understand, well, if we're looking at a foot, well, what does that actually mean? And then, of course, another common problem that we would see in kind of understanding the various queries would be fractions. As we were talking about before, that 3.5 inch, well, I can enter that in as 3 space 1/2. So understanding, well, what does it actually mean? And again, we wanted to make sure that we're kind of providing that example here of, well, what does this look like in the real world? This is an example of doing the same search on Crescent Electric and getting back in the same kind of accurate results. So I've gone from doing 6 inches as my search term to a half foot, 1/2, FOOT as my search term for a PVC end cap. And the results are being understood. Again, that query understanding, like ChatGPT was saying, using that AI to kind of programmatically understand kind of the patterns that we're looking at in these search terms, and understand what the actual request might mean from a product catalog matching. So obviously, when we think about a foot, there's 12 inches in a foot. If we're looking for half of a foot, well, that would mean 6 inches as well as a valid result. And so we can use that to then say, well, when these results are being returned, as you can see in the autocomplete there, we are pulling back in those 6 inches, the double quotation, 6 INCHES, again, all the variations of that product data, even though the search term itself that I've submitted doesn't contain 6 anywhere in it, does not contain inches anywhere in it. It's understanding the intent of that query. And of course, we want to provide one other last example here of going to that, like we had in that kind of mock-up screenshot of that 0.5 using decimal points can be another kind of struggle point for query understanding. And again, we've gone from using 0.5 feet. Other thing to highlight here is, because it's actually fairly difficult for search engines to understand and parse this query, is the fact that there's no space between that unit of measurement and the value. So 0.5 FT to the search tool looks like one word. Without having that space there, that can be a very difficult thing. So in the past, the way that this would normally be solved is a lot of like creating synonyms and kind of stuffing product data and so on. But using AI to parse out, well, what is the actual intent of this query? We can see that we're able to understand that even though that FT is being combined basically as one word with the search tool, or search term, that we're able to understand what that means, and again, continue to pull back in the relevant 6-inch products. So even though I've done 0.5 feet, FT, an abbreviation for that, we're using, again, there's no sixes in this, there's no inches in this, and we're still able to find the relevant products matching against both that kind of double quotation and, of course, the spelled out INCHES. So query understanding, we think, is a very important kind of process in here. And again, it's one of those ideas where using that AI can be very beneficial to, when we think about this from an e-commerce perspective, if I was to come to the site and I was to do this 0.5 foot PVC end cap, we have lots of 6-inch products that match this. But because the visitor didn't search on the exact way that my product catalog was specified, they would have gotten 0 results. And if I was to search on 6 double quotation PVC end cap, well, we'd only get 2 results like that we're currently seeing here. Only 2 of these products actually would have it entered exactly as I would have put it in. But we have lots of other products that still actually match it. They just didn't use that double quotation. So understanding the intent of that query can really be one of those key ways to help improve an e-commerce experience. And by leveraging AI, it doesn't become a big lift for a client to actually implement that functionality. So what's another area that we can leverage AI to help improve the e-commerce site search experience? Well, again, we're in complete agreement with ChatGPT here. Intelligent autocomplete. AI can power autocomplete features to provide real-time suggestions as users type their search queries. So kind of classic. Everyone knows what an autocomplete is. It might go by several different names. We've heard it referred to as a type ahead or a suggest ahead or search ahead or again an autocomplete. We refer to it on the HawkSearch end as an autocomplete. And actually, kind of a little feather in our cap, I thought it was important that ChatGPT referred to it as an autocomplete as well. So maybe we're using the right terminology. But what's important to highlight here is that how this can help improve the experience. So let's go ahead and get into some examples here. One of the things that we have been and one of the more recent things, actually, just since John came out, he said, in the last 9 months, he's been working with HawkSearch, and he has this AI focus, and it's been kind of immediately apparent because one of the things that we kind of initially really leaned into was helping to improve this autocomplete by using that AI functionality. And so what we can do here is, we were talking about how this kind of all continually builds off of the fact that we can learn from what visitors are actually doing on a site. What are they interacting with? What are they clicking into? What are they converting off of? And how can we use that information, and where can we present that information? And so an intelligent autocomplete will be able to leverage all of that information to also suggest kind of that information as soon as a visitor gets into that search box. So let's not wait for them to start typing in a search term, although obviously that should be something that is fully supported as well. The ability to suggest, I've typed in, sunglasses. Let me show you the sunglasses that match. Let me show you the categories that match. Let me show you the other popular searches that have matched against that. But from an AI perspective, we want to hit that user right away with information as soon as they interact with that search box. This shouldn't be something that we need information from them first, because we already know a lot about that individual visitor. We know a lot about what everyone else has been doing on the site. And so here you can see when someone has clicked into that search box, we are making those suggestions for those popular searches, making those suggestions for those popular products, and really getting into the idea of presenting this visitor with interactions right away. And from an e-commerce perspective, this has several additional benefits, because with a lot of clients and a lot of the e-commerce businesses, you might have several different categories of products that you're working with. And maybe I'm always going to this site to look for clothing apparel. But I didn't know that they had a whole sports shop. I didn't know that they had a whole wedding shop that was a part of their catalog. I was never really interacting with that. But, hey, I have my friend is big into sports. Oh, I might have been looking for a birthday gift. I can now see that was an option that was available on this site when I wasn't looking before. Oh, I've got a family member who's got a wedding coming up soon. I'm going to be looking for information for that. Leveraging the kind of signals and behavioral analysis and presenting this as soon as someone interacts with the search box can help expose kind of the full range of your product catalog, as well as exposing things like, what's trending on the site? What are visitors actually converting off of and interacting with at that point? So you get kind of the best of both worlds. It's a good way for product discovery, which we've kind of continually run into as a pain point within a lot of our clients that have these large, diverse, complex catalogs. Discoverability of what is completely on the site, leveraging that behavioral analysis and feeding it back into an intelligent autocomplete can help expose that, while also taking advantage of the kind of commerce-driven end of it, of, what's actually selling? I'm coming back to the site. Maybe I was specifically looking for a sleeveless top as we got into the summer months here. that's being immediately suggested to me as I've interacted with that search box. It can very quickly lead towards a sale on the site because I've been immediately presented with an option. Maybe it wasn't even what I initially came to the site for, but now I'm seeing that and it's something I can interact with. So, live site example, let's go ahead and give you kind of the proof is in the pudding here. We want to show off a client-oriented trading that is taking advantage of this kind of AI-driven approach to their autocomplete. So you can see in this example here for this screenshot, no search term has been entered in, but we are making suggestions for those various popular categories, and we are also making suggestions for top products based off of that trending functionality. Oriental Trading, I think, is a great example of this because they're kind of a party supply novelty kind of company. So they have a very seasonal kind of product catalog. What's important now might not be important in 2 weeks. And so we want to make sure that we're kind of understanding that and presenting the most relevant information. So you might be able to guess when we took this screenshot from the items that are currently listed on the screen here, it was just before Father's Day. And so obviously that was one of the top products that's showing up there. It's something that was very popular on the site, was trending on the site, was leading towards a lot of sales. And so we can see that being one of the first things that's suggested. But of course, in the summer months, we have lots of different kind of patriotic holidays here in the States that are coming up. And so you can see that that is also starting to trend on what is being suggested as part of that top products. And we just got out of graduation season, and so there might still be some holdover items that are still popular, still trending. Maybe there's some later graduation parties that are happening here. And so that continues to be something that is showing up there in that top products. This is something that, again, if someone first interacts with that search box before they've even typed in a keyword, they're getting hit with this information. It's all being driven through AI and understanding the behavioral analysis of what we're seeing on the site, what the visitors are doing. And it can be a way to kind of immediately engage with the visitor to find those additional items and say, oh, I was looking for a Father's Day item. Oh, it's right here. I don't even need to engage with the experience any further. I'm kind of immediately getting suggested with that. Whereas what we can see with the kind of popular categories, again, using that trending information, it can expose out kind of the range of products and range of categories that someone like Oriental Trading might have, because you might always be coming to them for party supplies, but you didn't know that they had a whole ton of teaching supplies and stationery catalog. That can be something, again, that helps expose out additional areas for visitors to interact with the site. And of course, if I was to start typing in a search term, that rest of that autocomplete then goes into that more kind of classic experience of suggesting your kind of common, what actually matches against the keyword that you put in, what are the products that match against that, the category suggestions, the popular searches. So you get kind of the best of both worlds here. And from a business perspective, this again is an easy lift because this is all being handled from that machine learning. That's all being handled from that AI as it's tracking what are your visitors doing? Again, looking at that behavioral analysis. This doesn't require any input from a business user. This does not require someone from the marketing or the merchandising team to come in and say, oh, we want to make sure that this is happening this way. It's the AI handling it, learning from what your visitors are doing, and automatically driving those functionalities. So let's go ahead and get into, I believe, one of the last things that we're going to talk about here today. It's maybe one of the more common ones that you might think of, but this has usually been more of a kind of a manual process. And what we mean by this is error correction. So as GPT is telling us here, AI can help detect and correct spelling errors or typos in search queries. This is just kind of one of those, again, nice tools. This is something that, again, in the past was a very manual process. It required someone to look at, again, if we go into the kind of mock-up screenshot that we have here, on a mobile device as well. So something else to keep, kind of as a quick little aside there. All of this functionality should be usable across all the various devices to showcase, the kind of trending functionality, the autocomplete like we were just talking about, the recommendations, the personalization. All of that should also work, of course, across a mobile device. And obviously from the HawkSearch end, we do obviously fully support that. But just something to keep in mind as you're looking at kind of how you can leverage AI tools is to keep that mobile functionality in mind, because obviously, at least from our internal reporting, it's starting to actually take the kind of lead in the experiences that we're seeing in search and commerce and in navigation. Is that, in the past, it was always, it was more like 40%, but now we're getting actually to being more like 60% of experiences are coming through a mobile device. So it's only going to become more and more critical to make sure that you have to have that feature parity across all the devices. But enough about that. To get back to the topic on hand here, error correction. And this is, again, like I was talking about before, kind of one of those classically manual processes where someone would need to look at, oh, here's a list of search terms. Here's all the times that we got back in 0 results. Oh, was this a misspelling? Oh, what did they actually mean by that? Maybe I'm not sure. Do we have that product in their catalog? Do we want to, really kind of, it required a lot of effort to kind of parse this information out. And then once you even decided, okay, well, this is what the visitor actually meant, well, then you would need to go in a tool and you need to kind of create that relationship and make sure that it was all kind of defined correctly. Well, what we can do with AI and how we work with this in the HawkSearch end is we're actually looking at, you know, what someone's coming to your site and searching on is almost always going to be products that you contain or categories that you contain. And so we can use that information of that, well, we're not going to be looking, someone's not going to be coming to a tool site and searching for, Stephen King as an author. They're going to be looking for concrete drills. And so we can use the AI to look at, well, we know what the product catalog is. We know what that's going to contain and what visitors are most likely going to be looking at. And we can look at the term itself and say, well, how far off is that from anything that's currently in the catalog? And we can be more specific about this. We can say what's the important fields that are going to contain these data points. What are the fields that are going to have the things that we can expect visitors to misspell? And then we can say, well, from the AI perspective, look at that data and use that as your kind of dictionary to spell correct against. Just like how when you're typing in Word, it has a dictionary of terms to suggest from, and you can always add those terms to that spell correction. Well, this is very similar in that way that it looks at, this is the product catalog that's going to contain all the data points that we can look at from a spell correction. And then the AI can look at that term and say, well, the visitor has typed in this term, concrete drill. We can see it's got 2 words misspelled. There, letters have been flip-flopped. We've dropped letters off. Well, how close is that to concrete drill in the actual product catalog? And using that kind of fuzzy logic there to understand what might be an actual suggestion. So again, let's take a look at this from the perspective of an actual practical example. Here we're looking at a client, State Electric Supply Company. And again, that idea of dropping letters off, flipping letters in terms of maybe you're fat fingering again on a mobile device. That's also very common. Something to keep in mind from that idea of on a mobile device, you are more commonly going to misspell something, or autocorrect is going to jump in there and flip your term around here. We can use that information again from that AI to say, well, I've searched for toggle switch without the I there, and the tool has obviously understood that correctly as a toggle switch, because again, we have toggle switches in our catalog. And so the tool was able to look at that and say, okay, well, based off of the term that we're seeing, using that AI to look at, well, if we swapped out this letter, if we changed this around, what actually matches in the catalog to bring back in those relevant results. And the speed at which this happens is also incredibly important. You don't want spell correction to actually slow down the experience. This should be happening basically immediately. And that's one of the things that we're also, of course, very proud of on our end, is that happens very quickly. You get that kind of, almost Google-like experience where you did that search, it's going to say, oh, no, here's what you actually meant, and here's the suggested term as well. But again, this is all handled through AI so that you're not having to build out these relationships of this term means this term means this term. Although, of course, you can't always do that if you'd like to, but we really want to lean into kind of the AI approach that your business users, your marketers, your merchandisers, your product managers, your content managers are not having to manually make these relationships, that the AI can learn from what is in your product catalog, in your content catalog, and make those suggestions. So I've been rambling for about 45 minutes. Hopefully you guys have gotten a lot of information out of this topic. Hopefully you've learned kind of the basics of AI, kind of that behavioral analysis. How are we tracking the visitors' interactions on the site, and what does that mean? How can that then impact the e-commerce? Well, all of the different topics that we tackled today, the different tools and technologies. So leveraging recommendations carousels, leveraging your autocomplete, leveraging spell correction, leveraging kind of the improvement of your search results, and how that then obviously improves the customer experience, and then will drive sales by getting the right products in front of the right visitors, leveraging what's currently popular on your sites so that visitors can very quickly find what they're looking for by the machine kind of suggesting that for you. And obviously we provided several real world examples of successful implementations, so you can see it's not something that is only available for the Amazons and the Googles of the world. These are regular clients that are taking advantage of AI implementation to improve that e-commerce experience. So with that all covered there, and as a quick reminder, we do obviously are looking for questions here. So if you've not yet submitted a question, now we do have several that have been submitted, so don't feel shy. There are other questions that are out there. But feel free to go into that chat box, submit your question to us. We'll be more than happy to answer. If we don't have enough time here, anything will, of course, be followed up through email. We'll be reaching out to you and answering those as well. But John, I've been seeing questions come in as I've been rambling off here, which is always a good sign. John, what do you have for me over here?
Yep, a couple, and great job, Jonathan. Also very clever to use ChatGPT as part of the back and forth there. I'm assuming in the future you'll include Siri on
Yeah,
part of these, and you'll be chatting, so you don't even need me anymore. It'll just be you and Siri,
we'll have
and
a whole
that'll be
series.
how we do all our webinars. Terrific.
Sounds good.
So the first one, when you're talking about the data, you talk about wisdom of crowds a lot of times, and I'm adding a little bit of flavor to the question here. But the point is, are there other systems of record, order information, what have you, that can be used to drive some of the AI strategies you were talking about? And how does that work? Like, what would you have to do?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question from the chat there, because that's something that we kind of focused from this presentation on the idea of tracking the behavior on a site, looking at, well, what searches are happening, what products are being selected, what ad, and so on and so forth. You've heard me say that several times now. But we can look at other information. So it doesn't need to just be kind of the e-com focus. It can be from other data sources. So do we have brick and mortar stores? What are their sales? What's being bought together at the brick and mortar store? Do we have a sales team? What are they selling through their systems? Do we have quotes that come in that we're then building out actual sales processes for? Those other data sources can be piped in, or should be able to be piped in. At least they can in the HawkSearch world. We can pipe that information into kind of the AI and say, hey, in addition to kind of all of the other information that we're tracking from the site itself, here's these other external sources that we can use. And so for some of our clients, especially in the clients that have brick and mortar stores, or in the B2B space where they might have warehouses, or they have a sales team that's dealing directly with their clients and selling directly to them, that can be really good information to help the experience become not just, well, what are site visitors looking for, but as a business, as an industry, what are our visitors looking for out of our product catalog, and leveraging those other sources can help improve that kind of behavioral analysis that we've been talking about. So yeah, great question. And that's definitely possible.
Very good. Could we take a quick look at the business side here? So there's going to be some time, effort, thought, et cetera, around some of these strategies, et cetera. In general, how do we approach ROI and how to think about ROI? What are the moving parts there?
Yeah, so there is a lot of reporting, kind of analytics in the tool to help understand, what is actually moving the needle there. And some of that can actually be handled through the AI to rank the strategies that are leading towards good conversions as part of that. And so you want to be looking at a lot of the reporting and analytics to understand what impact is this having. We turned this strategy on, we leverage this functionality here. Are we then seeing an improvement in the experience? Are we seeing that kind of ROI as you talked about? We do also try and make it fairly lightweight from a lift perspective. We have some quick implementation that we can do, and other ways that we can get that up and running, so it doesn't have as much of an impact up front versus in the long term, where you can start to see the benefit from it.
Perfect. And of course, there'd be some expertise and people within, our customers that know these things. But could you talk a little bit about our team? So implementation, et cetera,
Yeah.
like what's available to help with these AI strategies? What's the best way to work together?
Yeah. So, John, as you're well aware, and I appreciate the question from the chat there. We do have a full support team on our end that obviously is, this is kind of, as you mentioned, this is kind of where one of the ways that we're really leaning into over the last year or so, into really leaning into this AI. And so this is something that we do have full professional services. We do have our support team, our customer success team as well, that's kind of fully trained in all these different strategies, the different ways that these can be leveraged. So if you're not really sure, you want to, that it would be important to take advantage of things like, the behavioral analysis and the things like that kind of intelligent autocomplete, but you're not quite sure what would be the best approach for that. We definitely have resources on our end that can help kind of guide you through that and say, okay, given your industry, given the kind of goals that you're looking to accomplish, here's what we would suggest. Here's kind of some of the best practices. And I think one of the things that might not be clear to come across in this presentation is that we have a very wide, diverse catalog of clients, healthcare industries and higher education and B2B and B2C, and from small retail shops to giant industrial chains. And the benefit in that kind of regard is that we understand all of the various ways that those industries are different, and that what might be good for one industry doesn't necessarily apply to another industry. And so we want to make sure that we're leveraging not only AI to make sure that we're driving the best experience, but that it's the right experience for that. That, what's important for a retail clothing shop is not going to be important for an electrical distributor. And so the different ways that we can leverage AI can be really important there. And so having a good kind of professional service team, a good customer success team on our end, we're very proud of their knowledge and their ability to kind of hone in on those differences. So, yeah.
Great. So this is the last one, and it's a little tricky. Jonathan, there probably isn't an answer to this question.
Throw me a curveball.
I'm curious. Yeah, well, how are you going to respond to this one? But of course, like, what are the limitations? What can't you do with AI? Or maybe the way to approach that, to set expectations, what have you? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so something that that we, I don't want to say struggle with, but something that we are very cognizant of is those kind of limitations. I would say it's the title of the presentation is not all intelligence is artificial, but some is, and so we want to make sure that for those times that there is a business intelligence, that you've got an overstock of products, and you want to make sure that you're promoting that. The AI would not necessarily learn that based off of behavioral analysis. That's a use case where classic marketing and merchandising tools, like the ability to boost or to bury certain sets of results, the AI tool from a behavior analysis would say, oh, hey, this product that's selling really well, that was super popular within the last week, we want to make sure that we're highlighting that, but it's sold out now. No one can buy it. That's not a good experience for kind of the visitors that are then coming to your site. You might want to say that you have it, but it shouldn't be the very first thing that someone's seeing. So that's where you want to have the ability to can further influence and be able to not just leave the entire site experience to the whims of AI, because while that can automate a lot of it and can improve a lot of the experience without kind of needing to go in and manage it, being able to come back in and say, oh, that's out of stock, that should be further down within the results, or we've worked a deal with one of our vendors, we want to promote that, and that should have precedence over what the AI or what the business or what your visitors are saying. You roll out new product lines, the tool wouldn't know anything about that, your visitors might not know anything about that. So there's still kind of your classic business use cases that you would want to leverage your more classic kind of marketing, merchandising strategies, boosting, bearing, visibility, creating redirects, things like that, where AI just is not going to be able to kind of drive that functionality. So it really is kind of having, the way I would look at it is it's really about having the ability to take AI to kind of handle the day-to-day. You shouldn't need to be logging into a tool every day to manage kind of, well, what are my search results looking like? What's the trending now? What's it like? That the AI can automate that. That can handle the bigger, kind of the minutia of the experience. Where we want to make sure that we're then doing is that frees up the time for you to get into those experiences where it might need to be a little bit more tailored, or there is a high conversion search term that you might want to focus in on. That frees you up so that you're not having to worry about kind of the entire picture. You can focus on what's important to your business. So let the AI handle the grunt work, and then you can go ahead and handle what's important to your business.
Perfect. That was a good one.
Right?
Good answer.
Throw me a curveball, I knock it right out of the park.
Excellent. Okay, good. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Just a couple of final points. First of all, there will be an email that goes out and will be available on the website, arena-international.com. And the interesting thing is you can still submit a question. So even if you're kind of looking at it later or shared it, whatever, you can still submit it. We'll get it. We'll follow up. So take a look at that. And of course, we do continue to do these webinars. So keep coming back to the site to find out when the next one is. But that's it. Thank you very much for attending, and looking forward to the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.